I've been married to Jenna for 5 years. On the surface, we looked like a typical suburban couple, 2 cars in the driveway, a well-kept lawn, and plenty of friends in the neighborhood. We often hosted weekend barbecues, and everyone would remark on how perfect we seemed together. But the truth is, things weren't perfect. They hadn't been for a while. It started with small things. Jenna was always a little flaky, but I noticed she was becoming more distant. She'd come home from work late, claiming to have had meetings that ran long. At first, I believed her. I mean, she worked in marketing, and I knew the deadlines could be rough. But then there were the odd phone calls where she'd step outside to take them, and the way she'd suddenly become secretive about her phone. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I felt something shift in our relationship. One Saturday evening, I decided to surprise her with dinner. I got home early and started cooking. As I was chopping vegetables, I heard her come in and I turned around to greet her. But she was on her phone and, when I said hi, she abruptly ended the call. I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was work-related, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A couple of weeks later, I made a discovery that would change everything. I was cleaning out the junk drawer in our kitchen when I came across a small notebook. I opened it, expecting to find shopping lists or random doodles. Instead, I found a list of names. Each name was followed by dates and times, some of them coinciding with the nights when Jenna had told me she was busy. My heart sank. I flipped through the pages and the damning evidence just kept stacking up. It wasn't just a few names, it was a tangled web of lies. I couldn't believe it. Jenna was cheating on me. I felt the world tilt on its axis. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling within me. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I decided to gather more evidence first. I started paying attention to her patterns, what she wore when she left the house, the times she'd get texts that made her blood rush. It was like I had a second job, gathering intel on my wife's extracurricular activities. After a few days of surveillance, I stumbled upon more than I ever wanted to see. One evening, I noticed her texting while sitting on the couch. When she went to the bathroom, I took the chance to grab her phone. I didn't plan on snooping, but my hands shook as I unlocked it. The messages were explicit, filled with sexual innuendos and plans for secret meetups. My stomach churned as I read through the exchanges. It wasn't just one affair, there were multiple men. The betrayal cut deep, and I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. When Jenna returned, I put on my best poker face. I had to confront her at the right moment, not when I was still reeling from the shock. All I could think about was how I would reveal to her that I knew the truth. I waited until the next weekend when things were quieter. "Jenna, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but laced with tension. She looked up from her phone, her expression shifting from casual to wary. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage. "I found something you need to explain." Her face paled, and I knew then that I had her. "Found what?" she asked, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. "The notebook, Jenna. I know about the other guys." Her reaction was immediate. I watched as she processed the words, and for a brief moment I saw fear in her eyes, but it quickly morphed into anger. "How dare you go through my things? You have no right. You're being paranoid." I couldn't believe my ears. The audacity. I pressed her further, but she twisted and turned every question, throwing out excuses like a magician pulling rabbits out of a hat. "They're just friends. You don't understand how hard work is." It was infuriating to listen to her lies, but I kept my composure. I wanted her to dig her own grave deeper. I could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface, but I was determined to stay calm. By the time we were finished with our confrontation, I felt as if I had been punched in the gut. She was denying everything, and I was left with a sinking feeling that the woman I loved was no longer the person I thought I knew. As I left the room, my mind raced. I was filled with a mixture of disbelief and fury. I couldn't believe I had married someone who could betray me so easily, someone who could look me in the eye and lie without a hint of guilt. I knew then that I had to make a decision, one that would change everything. After the confrontation, I paced the house, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I felt like I was in a surreal nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Jenna was still in the other room, hurling excuses at me, trying to twist the narrative in her favor. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I realized there was no point in waiting for her to come clean. I had to take control of this situation. The days that followed were a mix of anger and sorrow. I tried to navigate through my emotions, but it felt like walking through a minefield. One moment I was furious, ready to scream at her, and the next I felt unbearably sad, mourning the loss of the marriage I thought I had. I couldn't focus on work, and my friends began to notice something was off. I brushed off their concern, telling them I was just stressed. I started to think about how I could gather more evidence, not just for my peace of mind, but also to use it as leverage against her. I had a friend, Mike, who worked in IT. I reached out to him, asking if he could help me track some of Jenna's digital footprints. It felt wrong to invade her privacy further, but I needed to know the extent of her betrayal. Mike agreed to help, and I felt a mix of relief and guilt for what I was about to do. A few days later, Mike sent me a detailed report filled with text message logs, call histories, and even the details of the locations Jenna frequently visited when she said she was out with friends. I felt a sickening knot in my stomach as I read through it all. There were several meetups with men I had never heard of, and one of them stood out: David, a guy from her office. I recognized the name. She had mentioned him a few times, always in passing, saying they worked on projects together. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. David was more than just a colleague. Armed with this new information, I confronted Jenna again. I chose a night when we were both home, and she seemed relaxed, watching television. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, but when I finally spoke, the words tumbled out in a rush. "I know about David," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Jenna turned to me, her face going pale. "What are you talking about?" I dropped the documents on the coffee table, the evidence spread out like a crime scene. "This isn't just about a notebook anymore. I have proof of your lies. I know you've been seeing him." Her reaction was instantaneous. I could see that she was calculating her next move. She quickly adopted a wounded expression. "You're being ridiculous. I can't believe you would think that of me. How could you invade my privacy like this? You're the one who's paranoid." I felt a surge of anger rising within me. How could she twist everything around? "You think I just made this up?" "I didn't want to believe it, Jenna. I wanted to trust you." She crossed her arms defensively, trying to maintain her composure, but I could see the cracks starting to form. "It's not what you think. David and I are just friends. Friends don't text each other at midnight about meeting up for drinks." I shot back, my frustration boiling over. "This isn't some innocent friendship. You've been lying to me. I deserve better than this." The room fell silent, tension hanging thick in the air. Jenna's bravado started to crumble, and I could see a flicker of guilt cross her face. "Okay, maybe I've been a little flirtatious, but it's harmless. You're overreacting. We were just exploring our options." "Exploring your options?" My voice echoed in disbelief. "What does that even mean? Were you just waiting for me to be okay with you sleeping with someone else?" Her silence spoke volumes. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me, mixing with the anger that was still bubbling beneath the surface. I didn't want to see this side of her, the woman I had loved, but I had to face the truth. She had chosen someone else over our marriage. As the confrontation unfolded, I felt like a spectator in my own life, watching everything unravel. The weight of her betrayal felt crushing, and I could feel the tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. But I refused to let her see me break down. This was about standing my ground, asserting my worth, and not allowing her to manipulate me anymore. I finally asked the question that had been weighing heavily on my mind. "So, what do you want, Jenna? Do you want to stay married, or are you done with this?" Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, and I could see the internal battle she was facing. I don't know," she stammered. And that was the moment I realized I needed to make a choice, too. I couldn't keep fighting for someone who wasn't willing to fight for me. I couldn't keep holding on to a relationship that was built on lies and betrayal. I turned away from her, feeling a mix of anger and sadness consuming me. I needed to think, to strategize. I had to decide what my next move would be. I didn't just want to react impulsively. I wanted to ensure I was making the right decision for myself moving forward. I knew I had to take control of my life, even if that meant letting go of the woman I once thought I could trust with everything. And so began my journey of plotting my next steps, a journey that would ultimately lead me toward revenge, but also, I hoped, toward healing. After that heated confrontation with Jenna, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down into an abyss. I had never imagined we would end up here. The thought of our marriage crumbling felt surreal. I spent the next few nights tossing and turning, replaying the last few weeks in my mind. Each time, I felt a new wave of anger wash over me, followed by the piercing pain of betrayal. I needed a plan. I had spent so much time being the good husband that I had forgotten to take care of myself. Jenna had made her choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. Revenge was on my mind, and it felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I didn't just want to get back at her. I wanted to reclaim my power, my self-worth. The following day, I decided to meet up with Mike. I needed a sounding board, someone who understood what I was going through. We met at a bar, the kind where you could drown your sorrows in a cold beer or two. As I sat across from him, I laid out everything that had happened: the discovery of her infidelity, the confrontations, the lies. "Dude, you can't let her get away with this," Mike said, his brow furrowing in concern. "You deserve better." I nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. "I want her to feel the consequences of what she's done, but I don't want to make it messy. I just want her to understand how much she's hurt me." "Maybe you can catch her in the act," he suggested, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Show her what it feels like to be on the other side." The idea hung in the air between us, and I felt a spark of inspiration. It was a twisted kind of justice, but it was exactly what I needed. If I could catch her in the act, I could confront her again, this time with undeniable proof of her betrayal. That night, I set my plan in motion. I knew Jenna had a dinner planned with her friends and that David would likely be there. I had seen a pattern in her excuses, and this was a perfect opportunity. I decided to follow her, to see for myself what she was up to when she thought I wasn't watching. I waited until I knew she was getting ready. I parked a few blocks away from the restaurant where she was headed, my heart racing with anticipation. I felt like a detective in a noir film, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment of truth. When I saw her car pull into the parking lot, I felt a mix of dread and exhilaration. This was it. As she walked toward the entrance, I could see her laughing, carefree. It made my stomach churn. I waited for a while, then finally slipped inside the restaurant, keeping my distance. I found a seat at the bar where I could see them without drawing attention. Jenna was sitting at a table with David and two other guys. The sight of them together made my heart pound in my chest. They were animated, laughing, and sharing drinks. I watched as David leaned in closer, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh even harder. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. The betrayal was no longer just an abstract thought in my mind. It was playing out in front of my eyes. I pulled out my phone, trying to capture a few pictures. I knew I wanted proof, something I could use against her later. The moment felt surreal, like I was watching a scene from a movie where I was both the hero and the villain. I was both heartbroken and empowered. Then, as if the universe had conspired to give me what I needed, I saw David lean in and kiss her on the cheek. My blood ran cold, and I felt the anger ignite within me like a wildfire. I had to hold on to that moment, to the image of Jenna betraying everything we had built. It was time to act. Just as I was about to leave the restaurant, I received a text from Mike. "How's it going? Did you see her?" I typed out a quick reply, "Yeah, just got proof." With my heart racing, I decided to head back home. I wasn't going to confront her right away. I needed to be strategic. I wanted to let her enjoy her little secret for a while longer. She was living in a fantasy world, and I was about to shatter it. When I got home, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I laid the photos out on the table, staring at the evidence of her betrayal. I could feel the anger boiling within me, but I also felt a sense of clarity. This wasn't just some petty revenge. This was about reclaiming my dignity. That night, I barely slept. I was restless, replaying the images in my mind. I had to figure out how I wanted to confront her this time. I wanted her to understand the depth of her betrayal, to realize that her actions had consequences. I thought about my options. Should I confront her immediately, or let it simmer for a few days? I decided to let it sit for a bit, to allow the reality of her choices to sink in. The next day, I casually went about my routine. Jenna was her usual self, bustling around the house, unaware of the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. I decided to act normal, to present a facade of indifference. I wanted her to feel comfortable, to lower her guard. As I watched her go about her day, I felt a mix of anger and sorrow. I couldn't believe that the woman I had loved was capable of such cruelty. But I was determined to show her that I wouldn't be a doormat anymore. I was taking back control of my life, and it felt both empowering and terrifying. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about standing up for myself, about reclaiming my sense of self-worth. I was ready to take the next step, ready to confront her in a way she would never forget. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences, and I was prepared to show her just how deeply she had hurt me. The days passed slowly after my night of surveillance. I had the photographs and the evidence that would expose Jenna's betrayal, but I felt an unsettling mix of anticipation and dread. I knew the confrontation was inevitable, but I was mentally preparing myself for the emotional fallout that would follow. Each day, Jenna continued to act as if everything was fine, and I played along, wearing a mask of normalcy while my insides churned with fury. Finally, I decided it was time to strike. I wanted to catch her off guard, to pull the rug out from under her. I waited until a Saturday evening when we had no plans. Jenna had been out shopping, and I had spent the afternoon stewing, going over my strategy. I arranged the photographs on the dining table, each shot telling a story of betrayal. I wanted her to see the reality of what she had done without me having to say a word. When Jenna walked through the door, she seemed cheerful, her arms laden with shopping bags. "Hey, babe, look at what I found," she exclaimed, her voice bright. She didn't notice the tension in the air as she hung up her coat and headed toward the kitchen. I stayed silent, watching her as she unpacked her purchases. I took a deep breath, readying myself for the confrontation. "Jenna," I finally said, my voice steady but low. She turned around, a smile fading from her face. "What's up?" I gestured toward the dining table. "We need to talk." Her smile dropped completely, replaced by a look of confusion. She approached the table and froze when she saw the photographs spread out before her. The room was silent, and I could hear the clock ticking in the background, each second dragging on like an eternity. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's what it looks like, Jenna," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "Proof of your little escapades, you know, the ones you thought I wouldn't find out about." She paled, her eyes darting from the photos to my face. This is not what it looks like," she stammered, her voice rising in pitch. "Not what it looks like," I echoed, incredulous. "You're kissing him, Jenna. How much more evidence do you need? You've been lying to me, sneaking around, and for what? A fling." Her defenses went up immediately. "You don't understand. You don't know what I've been going through." I didn't mean for it to happen. Didn't mean for it to happen. I shot back, my anger flaring. "You made a choice, Jenna. You chose to betray our marriage. I was right here, and you could have talked to me instead of running off to some guy from work." Her expression twisted into one of anger, but I could see the fear lurking behind it. "You've been distant too. I thought we were just going through a rough patch. This isn't just on me." I took a step closer, staring into her eyes, looking for any trace of the woman I had fallen in love with. "This isn't about us anymore. It's about the choices you've made. You could have come to me, yet you chose deception." She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "I didn't know how to talk to you. You were so wrapped up in work, and I felt alone." I felt my heart crack at her words, but I refused to let her emotions sway me. "That's no excuse, Jenna. You could have reached out. You could have pushed me to be better. But instead, you decided to betray me." The silence that followed was deafening. Jenna looked at the photographs again, and I could see the realization dawning on her. It wasn't just about the cheating, it was about the breach of trust, the fact that she had chosen to keep me in the dark while she explored other relationships. "Please, let's not do this," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "I can change. I'll go to counseling. We can figure it out together." "Figure it out together," I repeated, my voice low. "How can I trust you after this? You've already made your choice, and it's clear where your loyalties lie." Her tears began to flow as she reached for my hands. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. but I couldn't let myself be swayed by her tears. This was about reclaiming my own power, about not letting her manipulate me any longer. Jenna, this isn't about me forgiving you. It's about understanding that the damage has been done. You can't just wipe the slate clean because you feel guilty now. I stepped back, creating distance between us. I need time, I said, my voice firm. I need to think about what I want, but know this, our relationship will never be the same after this. She fell silent, her shoulders slumping as the weight of her actions sank in. I could see the anger, sadness, and regret written all over her face, but it didn't matter anymore. I had been through enough pain, and I refused to let her dictate the terms of our relationship any longer. As she stood there, defeated, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was angry, but I also felt a sense of relief. I had confronted her, had faced the truth, and had stood my ground. Now it was time for me to decide what path I would take moving forward. I left the room, needing space to breathe. I called Mike, needing to talk to someone who could help me navigate the chaos swirling in my mind. I hadn't just confronted Jenna, I was taking the first step toward reclaiming my life. As I walked into the living room, I felt a sense of resolve. I would not be defined by her betrayal. I would create my own narrative from this point forward, one that prioritized my well-being and happiness. I knew I had a long journey ahead, but I was ready to face it head-on. Jenna had made her choices. Now it was time for me to make mine. The days after my confrontation with Jenna were a whirlwind of emotion and uncertainty. I had laid down the gauntlet, but what came next was a troubling mix of reflection and decision-making. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, trying to determine which path I should take. I needed to reclaim my power and find clarity amidst the chaos. I spent the first few days avoiding Jenna. I didn't want to engage with her emotions or hear her apologies anymore. I knew she was remorseful, but I also knew that remorse didn't change the fact that she had broken the trust we had built over years. I focused on my own feelings, trying to process the betrayal and what it meant for our future. I reached out to Mike frequently. He was my rock during this tumultuous time, offering a listening ear and invaluable advice. "You need to think about what you want, man," he said one day during one of our phone calls. "Do you still love her? Can you see a path forward?" That question hung in the air, and I found myself wrestling with my feelings. Did I still love her? Part of me wanted to cling to the memories of our happy moments, the laughter, the love we once shared. But another part of me felt wounded and betrayed, and the thought of rebuilding that trust felt like an insurmountable task. On the fifth day of silence between us, Jenna approached me cautiously. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when she tentatively entered the room, looking small and fragile. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, looking up at her. The anger I felt wasn't gone, but I knew I had to address the situation. "What do you want to talk about, Jenna?" I just, I want to apologize again for what I did. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know how sorry I am," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I've heard that before," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "You need to understand that I can't just forget what happened. It's not that simple." I know," she exclaimed, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was confused and I thought I was going to lose you. I was just trying to feel something again." "Feel something?" I interjected, incredulous. "You thought sleeping with other men would solve that. You could have come to me, Jenna. You could have told me you were feeling lost, and we could have worked through it together." "I was scared," she said, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "I didn't know how to reach out to you. I thought you were too busy with work to even notice me anymore." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been consumed with my job, and I knew I hadn't been the most attentive husband. But that didn't justify her actions. "That doesn't excuse your choices," I said firmly. "You made decisions that hurt me deeply. I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. I'll go to therapy. I'll change, I promise," she pleaded. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of her words. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that we could salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But another part of me was screaming that I needed to protect myself from further pain. "Jenna, I need time to think. I'm not ready to make any decisions about our future right now, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I can't just jump back into this like nothing happened. I need to figure out what I want, what's best for me. Her expression shifted, and I could see that she recognized the gravity of my words. I understand. I'll give you space. But please just know that I love you and I'm willing to fight for us, she said before walking out, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As the days continued to drag on, I found myself at a tipping point. I had spent countless hours going over every detail of our relationship, what had gone wrong, where we had faltered. I remembered the moments of joy, but I also couldn't ignore the pain that had taken root. I started to think about what I wanted for my future, and the possibility of moving on began to take shape in my mind. I began to meet with a therapist myself, seeking guidance and clarity. It was a crucial step for me, allowing me to unpack my feelings without any judgment. I needed to process the hurt and figure out how to move forward, whether that meant trying to rebuild my marriage or closing the door on that chapter of my life. In therapy, I expressed my feelings of betrayal and confusion. It's like I'm stuck between loving her and knowing that I can't trust her anymore, I explained to my therapist. I feel like I'm in a fog, unable to see a clear path ahead. My therapist encouraged me to think about my values and what I truly wanted from a partner. Trust is fundamental in any relationship. Without it, you're left with nothing but uncertainty, she reminded me. Take your time and explore what you need for your own healing. As I worked through my emotions, I began to visualize my life without Jenna. It was uncomfortable at first, but I found solace in the idea of reclaiming my independence and happiness. I started to remember who I was before the marriage, before the lies. I began to consider the possibility of moving on and finding someone who valued honesty and loyalty. One night, after another long day, I finally sat down to write out my feelings. I poured my heart into a letter that I intended to give to Jenna when the time was right. In it, I expressed my love for her while also detailing the pain of betrayal. I knew that I had to be honest with myself and her about what I needed moving forward. As I finished writing, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was still hurt, still angry, but I was also learning how to prioritize my own well-being. I resolved to have one final conversation with Jenna, one that would lay everything bare. I would tell her how I felt, what I needed, and where I stood. It was time to face the music, to confront the reality of our situation and decide once and for all what my next steps would be. I had to let her know that I deserved better, and I was ready to take that leap into the unknown. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer willing to accept anything less than what I deserved. After days of reflection, I felt an undeniable urgency to speak with Jenna one last time. I spent hours rehearsing what I would say, wanting it to be clear and honest. I needed her to understand the depth of her betrayal and what it had cost me. She needed to know that I was not just a victim in this, but someone who was reclaiming his voice. That evening, I called her into the living room, the place where we had shared so many memories, both good and bad. Jenna looked nervous as she walked in, her eyes scanning my face for a hint of what was to come. "Sit down, Jenna," I said, taking a seat on the couch and gesturing for her to join me. She did, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and I could feel the tension in the air. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about us, about our relationship," I began, my heart racing but my voice steady, "and I need to be honest with you about how I feel." She nodded, her expression serious. "I'm listening. I love you, Jenna, I do, but I can't ignore what you've done. You've broken my trust in a way that I don't know if I can ever rebuild," I said, watching her reaction closely. She swallowed hard but remained silent, so I continued. "I've learned a lot about myself over these past few weeks. I've realized that I deserve honesty and loyalty. I thought we had that, but now I see that I was living in a fantasy," I said, feeling the weight of my words. "Your choices have made me question everything about our marriage. I can't go back to the way things were." Tears welled up in her eyes and she opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Let me finish. I understand that you're sorry and part of me wishes I could believe you, but the truth is, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. And I can't stay in a relationship where I'm Constantly questioning your fidelity, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Jenna's facade began to crumble. Please don't say that. I'll do anything to make it right. I'll go to therapy. I'll change everything. Just give me another chance. Jenna, you had your chance, I said, my voice firm but pained. It's not just about a mistake. This was a conscious choice you made multiple times. It hurts too much, and I can't keep putting myself through this. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I could see the realization dawning on her face. She was beginning to understand the finality of my words. I'm not saying I hate you, I added, my voice softening. I just can't be with you anymore. I need to move on for my own sanity and happiness. Her shoulders slumped and she looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. So that's it, just like that you're walking away. It's not easy for me, Jenna. This isn't what I wanted. I wanted a life with you, but it's clear that we're no longer on the same path. I replied, feeling a mix of sadness and relief wash over me. It was a painful realization, but I felt a weight lifting. I was finally making a choice that prioritized me. I'll always care about you, but I can't keep holding on to something that's breaking me, I said. You need to take responsibility for what you've done and the hurt you've caused. It's time for both of us to find our own paths. With those words, I felt a surge of strength within me. I had taken control of my life, and even though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew it was the right decision for me. Jenna's tears began to fall, and I felt a pang of sympathy, but I steeled myself. I had already endured too much heartache. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said quietly. As I watched her, I couldn't help but remember the happy moments we had shared, the laughter, the adventures, the love. But those memories felt distant now, tainted by betrayal. I stood up, ready to move forward, ready to reclaim my life. I think it's best if we take some time apart, I said, my voice firm but filled with compassion. I need space to heal, and you do too. Jenna nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I understand, she whispered, her voice cracking. As I walked toward the door, I turned back one last time. I wish you the best, Jenna. I truly hope you find happiness and learn from this. Stepping out into the cool air felt liberating, like I was shedding a heavy coat that had weighed me down for too long. I had chosen to confront the reality of our relationship, and in doing so, I had chosen myself. The road ahead would not be easy, but I knew I had the strength to face whatever came my way. In the weeks that followed, I focused on my personal growth, rediscovering who I was outside of the confines of my marriage. I leaned into my friendships and interests, allowing myself the freedom to heal. I explored my passions and took time to reflect on what I truly wanted in life. While the scars of betrayal would take time to heal, I emerged from the experience more resilient, more aware of my worth. I learned that love is not enough to sustain a relationship. Trust, honesty, and mutual respect are fundamental. As I moved forward, I carried with me the lessons learned from the pain. I vowed to never settle for less than I deserved and to surround myself with people who uplifted me. I was ready for a fresh start, ready to embrace the unknown with an open heart. The chapters of my life were shifting, and I was finally ready to write my own story, one filled with hope, authenticity, and new beginnings.